YouTubers are saying that the M1 MacBook Air is not worth it in 2024. I disagree. So in this video, I'm going to be telling you about my experience with using the M1 MacBook Air for the past 2 years and why I still think it's worth it. So the first argument that he said was that while the M1 MacBook Air speakers are decent, you can get better speakers with the more expensive models. Well, come on, I don't think there's many people out there who are upgrading their laptops just because of the speakers. And honestly, the M1 MacBook Air speakers are perfect in my opinion. With many Windows laptops that I have used, I found that usually before I watch a video or listen to music, I'd always grab a set of headphones. But with the M1 MacBook Air, that's not the case. I will happily listen to music or watch videos directly from the MacBook speakers. They are really good, they've got decent bass, everything sounds clear on these speakers, and I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything when using them. His next complaint comes with the screen. He says that the bezels on the screen are way too big. And while I do kinda agree, I don't think it's as big of a deal as he makes it out to be. The MacBook screen is still very good. The colors are great and you will not be disappointed. However, he did have a few valid complaints. The first one being the screen's brightness. The M1 MacBook Air has a peak brightness of about 400 nits. If you're the type of person to use a MacBook while outside, the screen is just not bright enough. I've tried using it outside and you can barely make out the text on the screen. So if you're someone who uses your laptop outdoors a lot of the time, then sure, it's worth upgrading to the newer computers just for the screen. The webcam on this MacBook also kinda sucks. It's only 720p and considering how expensive this laptop is, it's just not good enough. But I don't think it's a big enough deal that you'd wanna upgrade just because of the webcam. Plus, if you have an iPhone, you can use the new feature that was introduced called Continuity Camera. This feature lets you use your iPhone as a webcam for your computer. And honestly, I think it looks better than any other webcam you'll find on a laptop. So if you have an iPhone, that's a great way to improve your camera quality. I am planning on making more videos on Apple devices. So if you want to see those, please subscribe to the channel. Next thing he talks about is the battery life. He says that's great. I also agree. In my normal day-to-day usage, I'd always get between 9 and 10 hours of battery life, which is much more than you'll ever need. In fact, I'd only ever have to charge my laptop once a day, unlike with other laptops where I'd always be carrying the charger around with me because the battery life just wasn't enough. It's so good that I'd pick the MacBook over any other Windows computer just because of this battery life. Just be aware that if you were to plug in a USB hub or a dongle into the computer, it can reduce the battery life. So in my case, my battery life goes from 10 hours down to 6 hours, which is still very good, but it's still a big reduction. His next argument was that the newer MacBook Air has MagSafe support. MagSafe is cool, but I don't think it's something that you would regret not having. In my case, I've never ever felt the need to have MagSafe on my computer, and it works totally fine without it. It's a nice to have, but not necessary. His next complaint is the fact that the MacBook Air does not support having multiple external monitors. And I agree here. There have been situations where I try to plug in 2 monitors and the computer does not let me. The most frustrating part is the fact that the computer can support this. It's just that Apple blocks the MacBook Airs from using it in order to force you to buy the MacBook Pros instead. The older Intel MacBook Airs do support having multiple external monitors. The new MacBook Pros also support that. It's just the MacBook Airs that don't. So just be aware of that. However, if you have an iPad, you can work around this by using your iPad as a second monitor through Sidecar. When I do that, I can support 2 external monitors at the same time, and it works great, especially if you plug in your iPad directly into your computer.
Now let's talk about how this thing performs.
Now when he talks about the MacBook's performance, I also agree with him here. It's still great even to this day, and I feel like 90% of all computer users will be happy with just an M1 MacBook Air. This computer does not have a fan, so it's completely quiet the whole time and still manages to get great performance. However, I would highly recommend that you get the 16 gigabytes of RAM if you have a lot of windows open at once. For example, if you have multiple Google Chrome tabs open or you're watching YouTube in 4K, 8 gigabytes of RAM is not enough and the computer will start to lag. so make sure to get the 16 gigs of RAM. His next argument is price. According to him,
now in 2024, you can get an M2 Air for $899, only $149 more for a much updated machine.
That sounds amazing, but in my situation and in many countries outside of the US, that is not the case. For example, in my country, the price difference is still absolutely massive between the M1 and the M2 MacBook Air. You end up having to pay $400 just for these extra upgrades, which honestly aren't that big of a deal. The M2 chip is not even that much more powerful than the M1. Doesn't really justify that price. You're not only upgrading just because of the performance, but also because you want the bigger 15-inch screen. Then the price difference jumps to $530, which is absolutely insane. And at that point, I would not recommend getting the M2 MacBook Airs. So if you're looking for the best value for money Apple laptop, the M1 MacBook Air is still the best choice, even in 2024. And when the M3 MacBook Airs arrive, the M1 price will drop even further, making it an even better deal than before. So if you click on the links in the description, you can check out the prices for the M1 MacBook Air and maybe you can pick one up.